Election of 1860. Slavery was a big issue in the 1850s, dividing the U.S. with the Northern abolitionists against slavery and the Southern for it. Lincoln, from the state of Illinois, ran in the Republican Party, and his platform stated that slavery would not spread any farther than it already had. His other opponents were John C. Bell from Tennessee, John Breckinridge from Kentucky, and Stephen Arnold from Illinois. Abraham Lincoln received no votes in 9 states in the South, and his name was not even on the ballot in some states. Breckinridge and Bell had a similar outcome, not receiving votes in 3 states. Douglas was the only candidate who won votes in every state. Even though Lincoln did not win the popular vote, he won the election with a total of 180 electoral votes. The South decided to leave, and it erupted the beginning of the Civil War. Now here are some quick facts about the 1860 election you may not have known. Minnesota and Oregon became states during the election cycle. The original 13 states controlled fewer than 50% of the electoral votes for the first time. Lincoln received only about 40% of the popular vote in a divided nation on the brink of the Civil War. New Jersey electors split their vote, 4 for Lincoln, 3 for Douglas, and actually, Douglas was the person who won the popular vote. In the source eNotes.com, it states, "The South surrendered on April 9, 1865, when General Robert E. Lee formally signed the Articles of Surrender across the table from General Ulysses Grant at approximate in the Commonwealth of Virginia." The issue of states' rights with slavery constituting the single most important right demanded by the Southern states was the central focus of the Confederacy. The South's defeat in the Civil War, of course, reunited the United States of America. Although the bitterness felt by the South, its territory and economy were crucial.
The readiness and preparedness of the northern and southern states. The North and South were rushed to war, and neither side was prepared for it. The North only had 16,000 soldiers at the start, and then after 2 months passed, there were then 500,000. Confederate soldiers then had to stand up and defend their land. On both sides of the war, men and women helped the soldiers. Some examples are they raised money, ran emergency hospitals, and provided aid for soldiers and their families. In total, there were 3,000 women who served as nurses for the Union. In the northern side, tens of thousands of volunteers worked with the U.S. Sanitary Commission to send medicines, bandages, and food to the Union Army hospitals and camps. The Union and Confederate armies were low on food, clothing, and rifles. Most troops wore their own clothes due to the lack of uniforms. Soon enough, the sides had to choose their colors. The Union had to wear blue and the Confederates wore gray. Some didn't even know how to fight because there were farmers, teachers at schools, and laborers, and had to learn the basics. Lots of soldiers were very eager to fight. The Union contained 73% of the states in the U.S., while the Confederacy owned 27% of the states. The South knew that they lacked industry or manpower to keep up a long war with the Union. Also, the Union was well aware they were way more industrialized than the South was. The North contained 80% of the U.S. industry, while the South contained 20%. The Confederates lost a huge amount of possible industry, and manpower when West Virginia, Delaware, Maryland, and Kentucky joined the Union. The South was unable to compare with the Union after they lost those states. The Confederacy had just one ironwork, which was located in Richmond. The South was definitely lacking the industrial and transportational infrastructure to carry on or keep up with this effective war. Strategies of the North. The North needed to shut down the ports along the Atlantic and Gulf of Mexico to prevent the South from shipping their goods, which was mostly cotton, to Europe. They didn't want them getting the goods that they needed during the war. Another plan they had was to cut the Confederacy in half, so they needed to take over the Mississippi River. Then they wanted to seize the southern capital, which was Richmond. Southern strategies. The Confederates decided to prepare and just wait for the Union to attack them. They wanted to weaken the Northern Army, but then their plan backfired on them. Also, they thought if they tried to cut off Europe's supply of cotton, Europe would just help them in exchange for goods, but Europe just chose to get cotton from Egypt and India. As a result of this, the South didn't have enough money to pay for guns and maintain their armies.
Not only was Fort Sumter an important battle, but it was also the first battle of the Civil War. Fortunately, no lives were lost during this battle. This is the battle that had started the Civil War and led to a 4-year war. Fort Sumter took place near Charleston, South Carolina, by the Confederate Army. This was a 2-day battle which the Confederates took victory. Before Lincoln could get supplies which the Union needed, the Confederacy had already begun to attack the fort. Emma Holmes kept a diary and said what the battle was like from her perspective, which said, "At 4:30 this morning, the heavy booming of cannons woke the city from its slumbers. Everybody seems relieved that what has been so long dreaded has come at last, and so confident of victory that they seem to not think of the danger of their friends. I had a splendid view of the harbor with the naked eye. We could distinctly see flames amidst the smoke. All the barracks were on fire. With the telescope, I saw the shots as they struck the fort and saw the masonry crumbling. People fought but did not think about hurting others or themselves. The principal commander of the Union was Major Robert Anderson, which is who refused to surrender to Commander Bridge Gen PGT Beauregard. On April 12th, Confederate Army opened fire on the fort during the battle. General Beauregard had a total of 43 guns positioned around the harbor. He commanded this to save ammunition because he feared it would only last 48 hours. The first shot of the war was fired by Captain George S. James. In one of the Charleston papers, this was described next. At 25 minutes past 4 o'clock a.m., the circle of batteries with which the grim fortress of Fort Sumter is belleguarded opened fire. The outline of this great volcanic crater was illuminated with a line of twinkling lights. The clustering shells illuminated the sky above it. The balls clattered thick as hail upon its sides. Even though Anderson had 60 guns ready to fire, only a small amount were used because of his small force and low ammunition. He did manage to hold fire until day, but then his men began to fire. On the second day, April 13th, the battle continued. No Navy ships were used during this battle. The same afternoon, Anderson agreed to surrender when he felt his men had defended enough. On the afternoon of April 13th, as Anderson was officially surrendering the fort, the Union forces began firing a 100-gun salute to the flag as it was lowered. During the salute, some spare cartridges accidentally exploded, killing 2 Union soldiers and wounding 4 more. In a newspaper after the battle, it says, "Fort Sumter, standing as the last Union post in the seceded state of South Carolina, is awakened in the early hours of the morning of April 12, 1861, to Confederate artillery fire. The fort was surrendered on April 13th after almost 2 days of being bombarded and heavily outnumbered. The siege at Fort Sumter was the first major act of aggression by the Confederate States of America against the Union and would be known as the start of the Civil War. This battle awakened many and began which, unfortunately, many lives were to be lost as the battle of the Civil War continued. The salute was stopped after 50 guns, and Anderson and his men evacuated the fort. When the battle was over, Lincoln asked 75,000 men to enlist themselves in the Civil War.